Well, hello. Today is Monday, April 20th, 2020. My name is Angela Hooper Menifield, and this is your HR Moment with Menifield and Associates. So, wait just one second. I've learned some things about social media since I started doing these. So, I'm going to share my HR Moment if you'll just give me a second. But today's topic we're going to talk about is how do you manage relatives in the workplace? Now, some of you may be wondering, well, what do I mean when I say relatives? Am I referring to your relatives or is it relatives of other people? As in, there are people in your office who are related to one another. Well, I would say both, okay? So, when we talk about relatives, what we mean is, number one, what if the people are your relatives? And so what I have found is there are times when people have relatives in the workplace and it becomes an obstacle. It can create tension. It could create an appearance of impropriety. So one of the things that I recommend, ideally, if at all possible, it's not always practical, especially in small businesses where there are, other relatives working in the business. But when practical, do not manage your relatives. So in other words, if there are relatives in the workplace, is there a manner or a way that these relatives can work more in a peer-based situation? So in other words, if I worked in an organization and one of my cousins worked there and I was a supervisor, if at all possible, we should try not to have me in a supervisory capacity over my cousin, because what that could do is create an appearance of impropriety and have other employees concerned about my unbiased decision making. And one thing we always want to be able to stand up to is be able to have our decisions and how we handle things stand up to outside scrutiny. And so when I say outside scrutiny, I mean the complaint process, an investigator. But in other words, someone with eyes only on the documents would be able to look at what was taking place, whether that was who got promoted, who got hired, who got a particular assignment, how bonuses were levied. And they would be able to say that these things were done on merit and or some objective criteria versus being handled on favoritism. Now, there will be some situations, again, in small businesses that's just not possible. So some of the things I think we can do in these situations is try to draw some lines of demarcation. Now, there's no such thing as a personal life and professional life to me in totality. So in other words, as a person, you are the same person in both places, but you can create some processes, some procedures, and some things to mitigate exposure. So for instance, if there are situations where you would have to approve a relative's work or their leave requests, or even again, their promotions, give those documents to someone without the names on them and say, hey, could you review this? And would you come to the same conclusion? Perhaps if the relative is competing with someone else or on a position, you rate the applications in the blind. Or if you're looking to decide, again, does this work merit a promotion? Is it really good? Maybe you review it without the names attached. But these are just some of the things you can do, again, to add a layer or a buffer to help you not make inappropriate decisions. Like I said, unknowingly, because we call it unconscious bias for a reason. So you could be unconsciously biased towards a relative just because that's your relative. I'm honest, I'm unconsciously biased towards my daughter in some ways. So in situations where she has been in a role, I probably did show her favoritism. And then she would tell you on the other side, there are some times that I was unconsciously biased against her in the sense that I was harder on her. And I know that can be true as well. So in trying to be fair to both our relatives and those who we supervise, just being conscious of that is important. Now, the second area that comes up is when relatives work for you or with you. So this was very common in my other career because we had offices in a lot of small towns, and it's very common, especially in small towns, to have a lot of relatives working for the same organization because oftentimes that is the employer of choice in that locale. And so again, one of the things we want to know is want it disclosed, because we want to, again, try to mitigate any appearance of impropriety if possible. So one, we want it disclosed, but also number two, we want to try to equip them with the tools and resources to do some of the things we already talked about, as in manage their relatives in a fair way, and it not either be to their benefit or to their disadvantage by having them as a relative. Some of the other things that can come up in the workplace when relatives work together is that they bring family drama and family business to the workplace. And so one of the things that we can do if we're managing such a group of people like this is to have conversations with them and to talk about, definitely what you talk about maybe in the break room or whatever is your choice, but we would really prefer that you not bring your family drama to the workplace. And all drama is not bad drama, it's just drama. And the question just becomes, does it belong here? Does it make other people uncomfortable to hear the stories? Are we exposing too much? And so when you have relatives in the workplace, again, having a conversation with everybody, hey, Lisa, how are you? Having a conversation with everybody up front, again, puts us in the best position to be prepared, to be clear on expectations, what will work, what won't work. Sometimes we have to recuse ourselves from certain things. So there was one time in a previous position I had, I found out that a relative was working with one of the remote offices. The moment I found out about it, I was like, you know what? I typically oversee the person who works on this. So let me tell the person, let me tell my boss, and let me tell that office manager that any conversations about this particular contract, I should not be a part of, because I have a cousin that is the benefactor of this. And so again, that was just my way of making sure, one, my behavior would withstand outside outside scrutiny, but then also just making sure I don't do anything that has an adverse impact. Lisa said, what'd you say? Please don't bring the family drama to work, talking about that extra. Okay, exactly, Lisa. So I wanted to make sure I also didn't compromise their opportunity to advance and have things. And they did our organization a great job. At some point in time, they discontinued that work relationship. But again, be clear, disclose where those relationships are, set clear expectations. And again, just make sure, somebody else is looking, put maybe an extra layer to protect you as the supervisor, or protect the relative that may be in that work situation. But if you have an organization that's large enough that you have relatives working for you or you're managing, the odds are that you can do something to avoid that direct supervisory chain. So in other words, a parent shouldn't be managing their cousin or nephew or child or, spouses. And if possible, figure out how we can even get them to work in different divisions of the organization, depending on how big it is. But if it's a small organization, you may not be able to do that. And I've also seen situations, because organizations tried so hard to not have an appearance of impropriety, that people weren't able to be promoted. So what do I mean by that? The husband and the wife were at the same level, a promotion came up, but had one of them been selected over the team, they would have been supervising their spouse. So either the spouse had to be relocated or the person couldn't be promoted. And so just making clear what are the ramifications for all these situations, again, I think is really important. Ultimately, with the one case I'm thinking of in particular, one spouse left and went to another division or organization. And then in the second situation, a spouse actually took a leave of absence for an extended period of time and stayed home with the family. But then when they did come back to work, they came back to work in a different division. So when we can afford people, again, the opportunity to not be subjected to the claims of being prejudicial or biased but for their relatives, I think we've done them a service. So again, it's not easy. It does happen. It happens probably, again, more in smaller towns and places. I think here where I live, there's a lot of relatives working together. And we just have to be cognizant of that. It's not to suggest that your relatives don't deserve the job, but we always have to be cognizant of the appearance of impropriety. Doesn't mean we did anything improper, but what it does mean that there could be an appearance thereof. And last but not least, to go back to that spouse situation I remember working with, I think there were times that people questioned one of the partner's qualifications as if they were given things because of their spouse. So it's hard on them too. And I'm not suggesting it isn't. And I think this person was a highly reputable and qualified employee, but they had to deal with the speculation that they weren't. Lisa says, I had a husband and wife working together under me, and for some reason they became a team of drama trying to recruit the other employees to join them. Lisa, hopefully they're not there anymore, because that sounds like a whole lot of drama. But that also explains, Lisa, you bring up a good point, why many organizations won't hire relatives. So they'll make you disclose on the application, like, do you have relatives that work here? Because if you do, they, again, do their part to at least make sure they don't put you in the same department, or definitely put one in a supervisory capacity over the other. Because, that can be a challenge, Lisa. Hopefully you were able to navigate that okay, and maybe hopefully they don't work with you anymore, or maybe one of them has taken another job. But again, when we think about some of the other things, divorces, domestic issues that arise when that is happening in the workplace, it can be difficult for people to feel safe. And I've been involved in some situations like that too. That's good. Lisa says they're gone. But I've been involved in some situations like that too, where people were, the drama came to work. So when we can, we want to try to mitigate that. But again, just laying the groundwork. Sometimes it just really means having the conversation first to help people understand what the ramifications could be, and then how we're going to deal with them if anything arises. So thank you so much, Lisa. I appreciate you. It helps me to get feedback and to hear, some of the challenges that people are working with, because, these little short videos are intended to provide support and encouragement. Because supervising and managing people is not easy. I said it in another group for a boot camp we're putting on right now, but it's not for the weak or weary, right? You have to be mom, dad, counselor, friend, clergy. It feels like sometimes when you supervise people, you have to be all things to them. And so if some of these little videos and tutorials can help people just navigate that a little better, then I feel like, what I learn on a day-to-day basis is not in vain. So thanks everybody for watching. Again, my name is Angela Hooper Menifield of Menifield and Associates. And this has been your HR moment for April 20th, 2020. Last but not least, you may have seen some of my posts about the Black Entrepreneurship Institute's business boot camp. This boot camp is for all businesses, but of course we target the businesses that the statistics say need this type of resource the most, minority-owned businesses. I love you too, Lisa. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. And so if you know a small business owner or somebody who maybe this is the time, right? They've allowed the circumstances of what's happening now and working for other people, help them to realize that having my own thing would really have benefited me at this time, then, tell them to jump on one of our free webinars over the next 2 weeks. We have about 7 more. We did one yesterday. There's some some good information there. Also, some downloadable documents about the entrepreneurial mindset, but then also they'll get information about enrolling in our boot camp. So I'll put the link in this post as well. Thank you, Lisa, so much for your support. A lot of days I jump on and I hear nothing, and so you kind of wonder, is anybody watching? So thank you so much. You are greatly appreciated. I hope you have an awesome week, and I will talk to you guys later. Take care. Bye.